Brilliant. Thank you so much, Woe and the High 9 team. I hope that's blown your mind a little bit. It's kind of blown mine. And this is what this day was all about, is actually really kind of challenging our beliefs in AI, but also the use cases. We're not just building this for the minority, we're building this for the majority. And we need to actually move on with stuff like this. And there's a lot of information in the High 9 slides. And with Woe's permission, I'll make sure that you all have a copy of those. So I don't know about you, but I was trying to take pictures of all the links and everything else, but we will circulate those for you as long as Woe doesn't mind. So I'll make sure you get the copy of those. On to our final bit for this session. So I'd like to welcome our panellists, hosted by Chloe Rickard from the Digital Skills Partnership. So panel, come on up. Mark, come on.
He was busy chatting to Debbie.
I was actually chatting. Really good.
Grab a seat, team. And Chloe, we've got a stall for you as well.
That's right.
So I'm going to hand over to Chloe. She's going to introduce everybody. And following this, we've got a break as well. So enjoy.
Hello, welcome. So this panel discussion was titled Ethics and AI, the discussion that nobody wants to happen, which clearly isn't true because our three fantastic panellists all jumped at the chance to be here. My degree's in philosophy, and I got all of my ethics textbooks out at the weekend and had a look through, and there's no mention of AI anywhere, or robotics, or even computing, and that could just be me showing my age, but I think it says more about how new this topic is, and also demonstrates how, because of that, it's something we all need to engage in, like the technologies itself. This kind of whole ethical framework, because it's so new, can be incredibly positive, but also has potential to be really damaging as well. So for the next 45 minutes or so, our experts will wrestle with a couple of questions that have been submitted in advance, and then we will open up the floor to some audience questions as well. So I will introduce our panel to start off with. Mark Tindal in the middle is a regular speaker and chairperson at various conferences across Europe. He was also invited to provide written evidence to the House of Lords Select Committee on the possible effects of the unrestricted growth of AI. And he was also the Turing test judge during the Turing 100 anniversary event at Bletchley Park. Mark, tell us what the Turing test is and how you go about judging it.
So the Turing test judge is a series of wannabe general AI, so someone trying to pretend to be a human being, machine trying to, and a partition. And then on one side of the partition are people who are talking to these computers, and some of them are talking to real human beings. And the idea is to determine exactly whether you're talking to a machine as a judge or whether you're talking to a computer, to a human. The lineup was very interesting on that day, I must say. The winner on the day, was a little bot that decided that it was a Croatian boy, a 14-year-old Croatian boy who was pretending to be that. So it could overcome kind of language barriers and almost kind of trick the judges into believing it was human. So yeah, very interesting, good process to go through. I'm going to try and get another one started up next year, once COVID clears.
Sounds good. Walter here is High 9's chief data scientist and originally came from Hong Kong. And he's got direct experience of a world where credit card information or store purchase information is held by the government, and where facial recognition tech is on at lampposts and can tell where you've been. What's the difference in perception about AI between Hong Kong and here?
Yeah, thank you, Chloe. Yeah, actually it's a bit traumatic. Yeah. For the perception of AI from Hong Kong, let me first with some little story. Imagine you just share a bad news of this government in social media. After that, 10 people instantly reply to your message. They start to insulting you, say, "Oh, what American is much dangerous. Why you say something like that?" Or they will say, "What is your hidden agenda to hurt your own country? Are you a spy from America?" And other scenario is that you see a police in the street hitting a school girl. Then you think this is not right. You try to film, you try to take a photo, then the police try to trace you. And you manage to escape this time. But every now and then you find that when you are on the street, police can always find you and trace you. And you notice that, you realize that there's a CCTV everywhere. What is actually happening? creating a fake account in social media was very expensive because you need to, this information has to be unique. You need to have a unique face, have a unique identifier. But nowadays, with the help of AI, they can just use the facial AI to facial imaging processing to create many fake people face. It's just one click in 1 second. They just create a new identity. After that, they will use, before that they need to screen all the message in the social media, which is very timely measure. But now they can just use the classifier to screen all the message to see whether this is, is this message criticizing the government or not. If this is criticizing the government, they will use NLP to create a message which slightly repeating what you are talking about to insult you based on your gender, your age. Oh, are you a spy of American or something? They try to upset you in order to stop you to criticize the government again. And I think everyone use Uber. And in Uber, if you open Uber, you can, in the map, you can see where is the car. In Hong Kong, because of the CCTV, if you quite criticize the government, the police has some Uber app that they will see that those guys is nearby. If something nearby, the police can go to harass the people that try to criticize the government. So it's a bit traumatic still. In Hong Kong, many AI technology are always related to the control of freedom. Yeah, and after talking about the Hong Kong, let's back to the UK. I've been in the UK in 10 months. I can see that it's totally different in two aspects. One, this is people in UK really care about freedom. Yeah. If a government dare to do something like this, we can just kick them off in the next election. Second, people always consider that whether what things is ethics or not, but not in Hong Kong. As a data scientist, we have to be very aware of the ethics. We try to pause or even stop the whole project because we think that is not ethic and may hurt the humanities. Because humanity is the baseline of a human beings. AI may be harmful for humanities, just like what happened in Hong Kong. And it seems very scary, but just like the electric can light the road, but it can also kill the people. Execution. AI is just like any other tools in the human history. The decision is in our hand. Embrace the value of the humanity and let's make the future better. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So that's, yeah, it kind of puts everything into perspective, doesn't it, really? Our final panellist is Tania, and she's the co-founder of We and AI and helps to coordinate a project called Better Images of AI, which is a collaboration between academics, artists, diversity advocates and non-profits. And it aims to create a more representative and realistic visual language for AI systems. Tania, can you tell us about the broader aims of We and AI as well?
Sure. I left, I'd been working in industry and management consulting for many, many years. Always really interested by innovation, and there came a point about 5 years ago where I could see that I worked for an organisation that talked to a lot of innovation leaders, that AI was solving lots of problems, but nobody really understood the problems that it was creating on a wider scale. So I set up We and AI to try and get more people to understand both the benefits that AI can bring, and we've heard quite a lot of them today, but also understand more about the potential risks that there are, because I felt these were not understood either within organisations or within the wider public. And so We and AI looks at everybody as the public. public, so whether you're working in an organisation, whether you're working with technology already, or whether you have no idea that you're using AI technology, which goes for a very large portion of the country. And that's because without having lots of different diverse voices in the debate, we're going to have a debate today about some philosophical questions. If you don't hear different opinions, if you don't get different perspectives, you're not going to be able to build for anybody other than Josh, sorry.
You're coming out as the villain of this piece, aren't you?
It's about getting those voices in, and what we felt was lacking was not the academic research, not the policy debates, it was actually people's voice within that. And so really AI literacy is kind of what we're looking at, but starting very similar to what Will was saying at the community level. And there are still, I have debates with people who still say, oh, just because AI is important to you, you know, you're being really irresponsible by saying that other people, you know, everybody should spend their time thinking about it. It's really for those people that understand to create the right structures and the right processes. And actually, I had a professor of wellbeing economics at LSE to do some kind of mathematical equation which told me that I value people's time at 0. He kept giving me the number 0 because I feel that everybody should be empowered to understand about the systems they use and be able to say, do you know what would be great? You know, a bot that tells me where a food bank is. And until we have people who understand what's possible, we can't create a solution. So basically that's the aim, community-based education, not skills, knowledge, and starting kind of from the margins and working but we have had a lot of a surprising amounts of resistance, which I think often is this kind of idea, you know, public don't need to worry their critical heads about it, you know, and it's surprising how deeply ingrained that could be, so yeah.
Interesting. And if you don't know me, I'm Chloe and I head up the Digital Skills Partnership for Cornwall Council. We connect private, public and third sector organisations to try and create the ecosystem that Cornwall's future needs, and anyone can join on our website for events and other opportunities. So, new research published this week, I think yesterday maybe, predicted that the use of AI by businesses is going to double in the next 20 years, and more than 1.3 million UK businesses will use artificial intelligence by 2040. And there is a national AI strategy that says the UK intends to establish the most trusted and pro-innovation system for AI governance in the world. And some of the things that the roadmap includes is something like an assurance scheme, like a kite mark. But is that enough? I think the world in 2040, AI might look very different. One of my favourite slightly crazy organisation is called the Centre for the Study of Existential Risk, based in Cambridge, and they are dedicated to studying risks that could lead to the collapse of civilization as we know it, basically. It's all really fun, optimistic stuff. But they say, as AI systems become more powerful and more general, they may become superior to human performance in many domains, as we were talking about earlier, this kind of science fiction stuff. If this occurs, it could be a transition as transformative economically, socially and politically as the Industrial Revolution. This could lead to extremely positive developments, but could also potentially pose catastrophic risks from accidents or misuse. So whatever ethical frameworks we're going to build need to be pretty robust to deal with that, I should say. And it's the children in school now who are going to find themselves at the heart of this new landscape. So the first thing I want to ask, and Tania, I'll come to you first, is are we doing enough to teach children about AI so that they understand it and know when to question it?
No.
Okay, cool.
Short answer, yeah. So you mentioned the National Strategy on AI, which was published, there was a consultation period after the AI Council, which is the organisation or the body that was appointed by the UK government to basically to come up with a kind of roadmap which included the National AI Strategy, which came out in September. And it was generally quite well received from people from, you know, both the kind of risk-averse and gung-ho side of things. But the one thing that was completely stripped out of it was this concept of AI literacy. So we have a great programme which has now got more funding, the Institute of Coding and this kind of industrial masters, where there's funding available and scholarships to get people to convert their degrees to AI degrees, to engineering degrees, and that's really good. So coming from social sciences, you can pick up AI skills. There's also some funding to teach STEM teachers more about AI, but it's all kind of at the bottom of the funnel. So it's all for people who've already gone to university, done a humanities degree, and decided, arts or whatever, and decided they want to learn about AI, or it's people who are already in the computer science class, and we're really, really lacking that bit of someone who actually, is never going to be a computer scientist, or maybe would be a computer scientist if they understood what AI can do, and that it's not just learning Python. It's what does Python underpin, and that's how we get different types of people into AI. So that bit has been taken up, which is again why our mission has kind of increased, because it's not being publicly supported in the UK in the same way that it is in Europe. So in Europe, initially it was Helsinki came up with a 1% target for their whole population to have a general non-technical level of AI literacy. They produced a course which the EU picked up, funded, translated into lots of languages, and including Latvian and all sorts of languages, and have basically got this commitment to AI literacy. And the initial roadmap in the UK said that every school should have courses, every university should have courses, and that has that is not there. So we've been thinking about how we can try and impact that in other ways through partnerships and collaborations. It's one of the reasons why I'm here on the road.
Thank you. Mark, what do you think about how it's
short
done?
answer, yeah. So I've got 3 points on this one. So there are a couple of countries in Europe that have done this very well. 10 or 15 years ago, Spain spearheaded a load of tech courses that included machine learning, included lots of AI, lots of just semantic databases, semantic reasoning. Lots of that stuff was integral to the younger children within other countries like Sweden and Switzerland and a few others. Those are the countries that have led in the last 10 or 15 years the development of some of the most business, the stuff that I deal with specifically is business intelligence and the AI within business applications within contact and collaboration. But the countries that are leading that are the countries that invested in those courses nice and early. So those are the countries that we need to follow. We're behind the game, absolutely behind the game. We're so far behind the game that our children aren't even being taught software in school. They're not. The syllabuses are there. I suppose the right for someone who is, I was a little computer nerd, I was a software programmer. I didn't have access to any of that. I went to W.H. Smith, and that's how old I am. W.H. Smith, computers, and I used to play on the computers, and we couldn't afford one. There's a lot of little marks out there who really want to do that, and the only way that they can access that kind of programming environment, everyone has phones, have access to technology, but they don't have access to those type of computing devices. We need to get those into the schools and make sure that it's an essential part of the syllabus, just like maths, just like chemistry, just like physics. It needs to be there, and that is the government, that is our government. We need to lobby our government to make sure that that is front and centre, because a population that doesn't understand artificial intelligence, that doesn't understand the implications of artificial intelligence, are going to be the sheep who are users, and the people who are going to be led around by the neck by any machine intelligence that's put in place by other countries with their economic policies, with their own social agendas. That's my thoughts on the subject.
Walter, I guess you haven't got experience of schooling in the UK, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, let me try. But I think the situation are quite similar among the whole world, because with the fast development of AI, things are changed very rapidly. For example, you may Google 5-second deepfake voice in GitHub. they only need to take 5 seconds of your voice so that they can defect your voice to make a complete sentence or even a paragraph. Nowadays, with the improvement of AI, it's getting more easier to get someone fingerprint. I think this is necessary to educate the children to aware of it. Don't give any information to the people you don't trust.
Yeah. There's some general stuff in the computing curriculum in the UK about internet safety and not giving your data out to people online, but there isn't anything specifically, I don't think, about this kind of potential misuse of data. So
yeah, there's all about I suppose you've got a lot to do with cross boundaries as well. So you've got to look at the AI passports, for example.
Yeah.
That's a whole other subject I'm sure we'll cover in another day. But the other thing that just occurred to me that we could do as individuals in our homes and as fathers, as mothers, is that we can encourage our children. One of the huge advances in AI is huge advances in machine interaction. So collaboration is my industry. Was the launch of Alexa. Now, as far as I'm concerned, Alexa is stupid and it doesn't have the right tools behind it to make it any more clever as it is now. What it has done is it's introduced the entire the developed world, certainly, to speak into a machine. That is what we can teach our children, is they will understand a machine more by talking to Alexa, by talking to Google Home. I'm not sponsored by Amazon, certainly not. But talking to any machine or have interactions with a machine. I deal with voice user interfaces, so that's part of my role. So I look at a bit like you guys, I look at come at it from the language first. So how one interacts with a machine is wholly important to understanding a machine. If I start having a conversation with you, I'll make my judgments based on, not judging you, but we will judge each other in that conversation. So having that natural language conversation allows us to let our children learn how a machine interacts with you, so that in the next generation we get better and better, and then eventually we're in the Star Trek world.
Thank you all. Now it's time for a little thought experiment. Imagine, if you will, a runaway train going down a track. I don't even know where this is going. Ahead on the tracks, there are 5 people tied to the tracks, can't go anywhere. The carriage is heading straight for them. You are at the train station, you're standing next to a lever. If you pull the lever, the train gets diverted down a side track. The only problem is, down the side track, there's one person tied to the tracks. So you've got 2 and only 2 options. Option 1, do nothing, in which case the carriage goes down the first track, kills 5 people. Option 2, pull the lever, divert the carriage and kill the one person. What's the right thing to do? Put your hands up if you're going to pull the lever. Yeah, it's about, usually it's about 80 to 90%. That looks. Put your hands up if you're going to do nothing. Interesting. Do you think there is a right answer?
No.
Put your hands up if you think there's a categorically, objectively right answer.
Something wrong with you.
Yeah.
Depends who that one person is.
Exactly. So this is called The Trolley Problem, first written about by Philippa Foot in 1967, and something was definitely on my ethics syllabus at university. But what's it got to do with AI? Well, imagine what's on the track isn't a runaway carriage, but a driverless vehicle, capable of making the decision itself about what track to go down based on its programming. What if instead of, so how should we program that driverless vehicle? And what if instead of 5 people and 1 person, there was an elderly woman down one track and a baby on the other track? Or a data scientist down one track and an artist down the other track? Someone you know, someone you don't know, all of these things. So applied to autonomous vehicles, but also AI in general, the question becomes about how you program a system ethically, or whether you can even do that. And this is relative to a huge extent, as we've kind of seen, and you've said, how people answer that trolley problem depends on a huge number of factors: your background, what your kind of upbringing has been, your age, your politics, all kinds of different things. So AI systems are incapable at the moment of of irrational decisions. Everything they do is based on the way they've been programmed. So then if a driverless car has an accident, who can we blame? Do we blame the manufacturer, the programmer, the owner, the government? There's kind of lots of questions around this. So, Walter, I'm going to start with you. Should our autonomous vehicle kill the old lady or the baby?
This is really a controversial problem. Yeah. Supposedly, if there are more self-driving cars available, they should collect more data and the mortality rate should be decreased. But things are going to be happen and sacrifice must be made. Yeah. So the answer is before saying my answer, let me introduce some some method in Asia. Yeah, some countries is actually using. Yes, it's called the social credit system. As you guys may watch the video of the Black Mirror season 3. There's something called social credit, and it's actually a composite score of oneself. Everyone within that country will have a score. That score is composite of your socio-economic status. As of this is just your income, your saving, your status, what is your job, what is your parents, your political views, and minus if you do something bad on the street. For example, you cross the red light, you say the foul language on the streets, and your score will be deducted. And using that score, some Asian country use that score to determine what is a value of a person. So, in terms of the Trolley Problem, it will see which. Yeah, obviously it will use that score to determine who to kill or who to save. It sounds very scientific, but it is actually doing it in some Asian country. Yeah, and also they use this score system up to a level that if you have a very low score, then you cannot go to the supermarket, and if you cannot pay it because all they do not accept cash, you can only pay by Apple Pay or something, but you cannot pay it because you have a low score, and you cannot go use the public transport, and more extremely, you cannot open your own door of your apartment. Oh. So actually they are forcing you to death, because this score also affects this score is for the whole household. For someone who try to save you, their score will be also deducted. So you can see a society that someone is going to die, but no one can help. It's the whole society bullying, or you can say the government is just bullying. Yep. So. So the question is, never do something ethics. When we try to. When we never try to quantify a person, a value of a person, we should also preserve our humanity to make a better world for our future. Thank you.
Wow. Tania, what do you think about it?
I think I might have just been swayed there. So I usually sit on the fence on this one, because for me it's the debate that's really important, and it's the understanding of trade-offs that we all make, and if it's not directly impacting us that something works perfectly for us, it might be negatively impacting somebody else. And so I think it's a really useful example to think about the systems that we use and their impact on someone else. So people always assume, because I work in this sphere of kind of AI ethics, that I hate targeted ads, and I shut down my privacy. I love them. I absolutely love targeted ads. Make stuff as relevant to me as possible. But I'm very aware that there are people there who aren't able to make the decision. They just think a pair of shoes is following them around, and it's a sign that they have to buy them, whether they have the money or not. So for me, it's about being able to have the visibility of that decision making, and to have the debates about the understanding, the knowledge, and have the debates. And so that's my first point actually. The second point would be it's also why we need governance, which I think the more people who have these debates, the more we can get the democratic process, speed it up. EU are kind of leading the field in terms of some draft regulations that are going through now, which would categorise, for example, the kind of social scoring that Walter was talking about. Is banned under EU law. However, there are still some, so that's kind of banned category, and you've got high risk categories, which are, medical, driving, driverless cars would definitely be in the high risk, and that means that there has to be a lot of, an awful lot of rigour behind any system that you have. And it's a really good move, because I've had a colleague who used to work in self-driving cars for Uber, who was always trying to engage with the Pentagon, and was always, like, they just couldn't wrap their heads around it. So there's sometimes a bit of a myth that it's the tech companies that are making all these decisions, but actually sometimes they want to know. It's like, if you don't have brakes, you can't drive fast. You need to know what's possible, what's not possible, and have these debates. So I think governance, be it regulation, legislation, etc., is something we all need to be involved in and drive through, so that we're not the only one making these decisions, and it's certainly not, kind of Elon Musk making this decision about who dies or, who lives, which is...
Don't look up.
Exactly. So I think that's my second point. But I also, I really like Wolf's kind of answer, and it's the Kantian, so there are very few Kantian, it's the kind of idea that you should never take an action, you should just let things be, and you're the philosopher, so I shouldn't talk philosophy to a philosopher, because I'm definitely not one, but I think that quantifying, that idea of what you said of quantifying people is quite based in our own individual, our idea of that is based on where, the society that we grew up in. So I think in a lot of Asian cultures, the whole, the good of society outweighs the individual. So an individual, and that's a moral decision. So that's ethical there. It's like, we must look after the community, we must look after everybody, rather than concern ourselves with the individual. And so this is where, AI ethics on a global scale gets incredibly difficult, because, in a way, it's kind of, obviously listening to your stories, I'm incredibly feeling like, no, we must never quantify the individual, but then that's my morality, and ethics is different from morality. Morality is more the kind of group understanding. Your ethics is your kind of, but it is really, really challenging, and there are moves again now with different countries getting around the table to try and get a more global perspective. But I think it's really, it is really important that we all look outside of our individual lives to see how it can play out elsewhere. So I'm glad to get the opportunity to hear that firsthand.
Yeah, for sure. Mark,
I love both of these answers,
Yeah.
so I'll go with that. No, so for me, the word bias, I need to start with this conversation, it's about bias. Look, I like to think of myself as a good person, but I have personal prejudice, I have personal bias. That's what makes me an individual, as well as physically. We are all different in how we believe and how we act with other people. That bias is present in society, small towns, Penzance is where I live. There are certain cultural biases there are certain cultural biases within Cornwall. We don't have a global view of what is right or wrong. We don't have that. The bias doesn't exist globally. Otherwise, we would have just one big government and we'd all be singing happy things and rainbows and lollipops. We are all different. That is effectively the problem. So you've got that bias. That bias is going to be... Has anyone heard of bias in the programming before? Heard of this before? Okay. So I had a great example of that the other night, actually, and it's not a great example. It's a terrible example, but it's an example nevertheless. So I searched for... My partner and I were talking about Whoopi Goldberg, and she was fantastic in something we were watching, and we typed in a little voice search. Fabulous, Google Home, give us some movies with Whoopi Goldberg on Netflix. And there was no movies with Whoopi Goldberg, but there was Malcolm X, and black movies, black faces all over the screen. cast. None of them have got Whoopi Goldberg in them. None of them are funny, just because she's black, right? Now that to me, she is black, right? Okay, so I'll give you that one, but it isn't such my criteria. It's just a bunch of black people on the screen. So for me, I can't be offended on behalf of another race, but that to me was bad categorization. But it classifies bias in the programming perfectly for me. It has that ability to, for someone who has written that, what is Whoopi Goldberg? She's black. Is she necessarily funny? I don't know if that was even part of the algorithm. So what you've got is this trolley, and I'm going to get back to the question, I promise. So whomever has decided personally, from a geographic point of view, or from a cultural bias point of view, the most important person to keep, without all of the information, is the bias that's needed to make that decision. For me personally, I wouldn't pull the lever because I felt that I would personally feel that I was interfering with what was already happening, but that is a complete get out. So.
Panty in our midst. That's really interesting. And actually what you're saying about the bias it really leads on to another question that we were asked over Twitter that I'll ask. I think we've got time just about. Which is, how important is diversity of team members for ethics in AI? Who wants to go first on that?
I'll jump in on something you said on bias there.
Yes.
And I think a really important thing to know is that bias actually is a good thing. It's a fundamental part of our survival as a species, that we are able to make judgments and see situations and think, oh, I better run away from that, mammoth or whatever it is. I think that people can shut down quite a lot when you start talking about unconscious biases or cognitive biases, but actually they're part of what makes us survive. However, so I think it's not all about kind of thinking about our unconscious biases. However, obviously they're a product of our particular lived experience and our life, which can be completely the opposite to somebody else's. And so what's really important is to get people who have those different perspectives, because I've sat in rooms where people have got these great design thinking toolkits, we're all trying to think of unintended consequences and how we're going to stop this product becoming evil. And we're all a bunch of educated, usually primarily white people sitting in a room in London, trying to stretch our brains, thinking about what somebody else's lived experience might be. And I think for me, yeah, absolutely, that's why you need diversity of teams, but you don't just need the diversity, you need to have those other lived experiences. And there's commercial reasons. I mean, if you think of the amount of facial recognition technologies that people have invested money in, so a lot of the big tech companies say, oh, actually, we're not going to monetize this anymore because actually, it's really shit. Sorry, but and you just think, wow, what a load of. If you'd have just had one black person in the room when you were developing that, you could have saved yourself billions, guys. It's kind of so there's a commercial reason for it, but it's not. The one thing I said, don't stop at diversity. It's got to be inclusion as well. And there are times, what Google have done in bringing in teams of diverse AI scientists, and then shutting them down, treating them badly. It's not just about having the people there, it's about thinking about how differently they might need your structure to be be able to participate.
It's that tokenism as well, isn't it? It's if you wheel me in as the honorary Scots.
It's actually a rule, we have to have one Scots.
Scotland, do I represent everything about Glasgow? So just sort of wheeling in someone from Pakistan, someone from Nigeria. Are you then ticking all the boxes for that? I suppose it's also about travelling with those ethics as well. So if you've got if you have a car manufacturer here in the UK, that would be great, wouldn't it? But a car manufacturer here in the UK that decides on these parameters and has mainly the social and economic bias of the UK people, the UK citizens. Can you then sell cars to Russia? Can you then sell cars to China? Can you then sell those same values? So the Chinese government might decide that they're going to sell into the UK, and they have their own programmer bias. So does that mean that every single, so you need a chip, the British chip, the British AI chip, the French one, the German one, and those then, and then can you allow a German chip? This is, I said I wasn't in touch with this just now, but passports is exactly that. You have an AI chip which is a German one, but it has a passport to visit Sweden because it has the same moral values, or at least has built-in values for the Swedish people. So we need to consider cross-cultural, cross-border AI intelligence, just to make it more complicated.
I think and cross socio-economic things as well. I remember years ago having a conversation with my dad about driverless cars, and he was saying, well, the thing will be that if you've got a more expensive car, you'll be allowed to go in the fast lane on the motorway or something, and so that you quite quickly get to a very strange world with different classes.
I think we'll end up with one lane, and it's a different subject, but we'll end up with one lane which is for people who want to drive the cars, and then the rest of the lanes will be a bit like horses, and then we'll eventually only have areas where you can specifically don't have a little play in your car, and then the rest of the world is that way.
Oh, I don't know, man.
1 in 10 times getting anywhere.
Walter, what's your thoughts about? I mean, looking at the team here, there's lots of different looking people, and hearing about some of your experiences, there's a lot, some lived experience really directly related to what you're trying to build, which is, it's really inspiring to hear. What's it like working in the team?
Yeah, okay.
Can't be Ria's one.
No problem. My boss is here. Actually, one of the one shocking, the cultural shock is that I found that many common sense, so-called common sense, is not common around the whole world. And it's just like a blind point. If you live for so long and you think that this is common, but eventually you find that people in UK or people in Algeria found this is not common. For example, for the obedience of jabbing to do the jab, in Hong Kong people are very refused to do it. It's common, but in UK people, let's not talking about the politics. Yes, but I think if with more diversity in the teams, you are more easy to find out where is your blind point, so that we can, I can't say solve the bias of the programming, but we can somehow handle or take care of the bias if we as a team have a diversity.
Yeah. Have we got any time to ask for audience questions? Or?
We have, yes.
Yeah?
We do.
So 3 amazing, interesting brains here. Who would like to pick them?
Everyone's shell-shocked.
Everyone's just like, oh, it's not bad.
Well, firstly, I would like to make a comment to what Mark said. He said, can you get offended for another race? Yes, you can. It's the right thing to do. There was something very interesting that Walter shared about how a lot of Asian countries are using IA to create social value for a human being. And I found that kind of linked to what Mark was talking about, the passports, and as an immigrant into the UK, and how it's absolutely the same thing. As someone from Africa, I've already been assigned a social value, and I can't come to the UK. Actually, my visa was denied 2 times before I came because I'm African. But if I was born in Australia, just get on the plane and come. And so it's kind of created this, I can kind of see the same thing mapping itself in IA, where certain biases are opening up, access to certain resources for people that have been already designated as worthy of those resources. So it's a very interesting
Yeah.
conversation.
If you start at the back of the queue, it's a bit like that YouTube video, isn't it, where they teach all the school children, you know, to take a
Yeah.
step forward if you
Yeah.
feel like this. And it's a bit like, so the developers of these cars, and take cars out of the equation, but the developers of all the technology are coming from developed countries because they've already got that head start. So therefore, that is the inherent programming and the tendency for that technology to tend towards those cultural biases.
I guess what it also says as well is that all of those problems already exist, and this it's just another application of them, and one that has potential to almost widen the gap, like you say.
Absolutely. It has the potential to widen, and I'll talk about, if you're still around, I'm going to talk about this later, but it absolutely is set up to widen the gap. But what it also is doing is putting under a microscope some of those societal structures and systems that couldn't previously be, quite put in numbers and analysed. And so I kind of, I'm ever an optimist, and I think if enough people see this as an opportunity to say, well, hang on a second, yes, okay, there's that example of judges where they did studies to say, like, real life human judges are more likely to send people, give longer sentences, on particular days or after lunch or whatever it is. So we're all, if they're hungry. So acknowledging that humans aren't perfect is really important, because it's humans that are building these systems. But I think if we then say, but how can we actually try and make it better rather than just kind of letting it happen? So I think that was definitely one of my motivations for, leaving the beginning of the pandemic, or just before the pandemic. Didn't know about it at the time. Kind of paid job, set up a charity, was very much because I want there to be more people saying, let's use this as an opportunity to see what good we can do now that we can really analyse some of these awful, historic, socio-technical, any technical system is a total socio-technical system, it just is.
Yeah, really interesting. Any more questions from anyone? Oh wow, now all the hands come up. I'm going to leave you to tell me how much time we've got left.
Yeah, I'll give you some warning.
Perfect, okay. So in order of the hands, it was up there, and then there, and then in the middle there. So, yes.
Well, this is kind of to everyone, really. I'm a complete AI novice, and I'm here kind of almost as an imposter. I'm actually in public dental health, so I'm kind of trying to see how I can worm my way in somehow.
We'll get your industry next.
But one of my sort of kind of questions and kind of thoughts is that, obviously I'm about behaviour change and things like that, and kind of what I study really is about emotional intelligence, about our decision making, particularly our emotions involved with our decision making. And so kind of when we're talking about AI in schools and teaching it to children, and Tania touched on it about sort of the decisions that we're making when we're getting ads directed to us, and then that person, may be sort of kind of blindly thinking this is a sign, I need to buy that. Obviously, there's an amount of emotional intelligence needed to actually consciously get involved with the systems that are trying to feed us information. So kind of the question really is about, do you think that these things need to be kind of taught side by side really to our children? Because the more emotionally intelligent we become, the better we can kind of make the AI can kind of teach us. And is there almost a limit to AI because of our own human limits of how much we consciously know about our own brains and our own emotions and things like that? So it's kind of like a pondering question about emotional intelligence and AI and where you see it going because of that.
If you, I don't mind just answer very quickly. If you go into, for example, so you mentioned a couple of things there. So the first one is, I think as long as we've got visibility of the data, so the big data information that we feel is following us around, it's actually a lot better now. It used to be discrete, it used to be hidden, it used to be under the back engine. I have found it's not easy to find, but if you can find it, one can find it on Facebook now, and it tells you exactly who you are. on Facebook. So next time you're on there, have a little look and see where you are. It did have pregnancy on there for some reason. I won't even go into the reason why that is. Absolutely not. But that's the first part. There is the emotional connection with the machine is absolutely essential for us to learn about what a machine can and can't do now, because the more that we feel that our emotions are being reflected back to us by machines, is the closer we're getting towards general intelligence. But it's the closer we're getting to conversations with machines, and conversations with machines is the next stage, in my opinion, of course, is the next stage. And natural conversations with machines has been possible for some time, and is becoming, the technology is there, it just needs to be released some very clever programs from the universities, so there's hopefully down here in Cornwall.
So any of you two want to come in on?
Yeah, I think just to clarify the question, we're talking about emotional, teaching children the emotional responses to machines. I'm not sure I completely understand the
I
question.
suppose it's kind of more about the fact that as human beings, we rarely understand ourselves and the reason why we've made a decision. We're quite impulsive, and so we may not even be aware that we're impulsively buying something to fill a void in ourselves. And it's the kind of then how that interacts with AI, because if we're programming like the bias, are we even aware that we're kind of programming a bias in if we're not really aware of our own sort of kind of emotional, does that make sense? So
yeah, I think so, and I think I guess there's two thoughts on that. One of which is back to the EU guidelines, and we're talking about kind of chatbots and language processing. Their next level of risk, down to the kind of medium risk, is things like chatbots, where they want, you have to say that this is a bot, so you have to be very clear. So, and I'd be really interested in hearing more about how we can at one point make something really user friendly, and at the same time make it really clear that you are being subject to something that's trying to tap into your emotions and build a rapport with you, but it's a bot. So I think that's quite an interesting area, and of course when Alexa first got launched and we realised all the voice in voice technology, quite often it's the female voice that's the servant, and it's kind of it's reinforcing stereotypes. So I think that we need to be quite careful when we try and deliberately use machines to manipulate emotions, that we're very clear to people that that's happening to them. So I think this is one of the areas where potentially there just need to be guidelines so that people will not get lulled into thinking, that, and I've done it with my Google Home, the whole good night Google, and, and then I'll say sometimes, or there's a whole routine around good night Google, and then, sometimes during the pandemic, certainly I'd kind of go, night Google, and really, ultimately, that's quite dangerous. So yes, I think that some element of psychology, to be able to, think, look, and he'll sometimes say to me, just and from all fighting, they sometimes say, it's my job, and I think they put that in to say, look, I'm just doing my job just to say, I'm not your mate. So there's things that technology companies can do to, make things visible.
There is there's a really interesting, but I'm not a psychologist, I'm an enthusiastic amateur, books on the subject, and one of them was a emerging theory around constructed emotion as well. So the philosophers and the psychologists would know much more than I do. Constructed emotion allows you to almost manipulate one's own reaction to things. It's self-help stuff, it's very good for that. But it's also starting to be adopted by technology, and that is quite worrying. That is quite worrying. Constructed emotion and machine intelligence are a combination that I would be concerned about.
We have got less than 2 minutes left. So probably time for one very, very quick question. There was one from Will and one from Chloe. Sorry, Chloe. They'll all be around at lunchtime though, presumably.
Back was a lot of the conversations I would say is that because neural networks came because we got access to big data and GPUs. With Edge AI, it's putting it back. So, for instance, the lady at the back talking about the fact that when you're in Africa, so we've got a person from Africa, is that it's just about to change. And this is where we're in that hype cycle, is that the AI is going to be in the hands of the individual, which is going to terrify the governments. Right now, because of the big data and the GPU, I just wondered if you agree with this, is it's in the hands of the governments and the big tech, it's just about to flip. And when that happens, there's going to be unintended consequences, but that means everyone's walking around. This has a TensorFlow chip in it. This has a machine learning chip, and I'm walking around with it. Now, what can that mean for the individual? Back to the government. Now, as E.O. Wilson turned around and said, we're all just mammals with a legal system that is made back in the Middle Ages, with technology that is magic. Right? The governments are still in the Medieval Ages. If we've got the magic, that's what I think we don't talk about. And I think that's where the next revolution's coming. That we're all talking about the top down, but the bottom up is even more transformational. I don't know whether you agree with that. Or Walter, because I talk about all the stuff. So for your experience, Walter, you lived in that top down society. And I know how keen and you talking about, just imagine if we could do that to the individual.
I think the chatbots that from down to earth is to having the people in this are very good. Yeah, because those AI, at past those AI are just controlled by the powerhouse and the large company. They just aim at how to help the government to control the society down to top to bottom. But now on, and because of the most rules, the most laws. The calculation power become better and better, and I'm happy to see that the AI are helping the people in disadvantage.
I'd say that our government have that is a priority. I'm sure it's in some think tank somewhere and someone's working on it. But having spoken with Lords and the Select Committee and other occasions and some of the papers, my piece, the biggest problem they have is the biggest worry that all governments have, which is money. And it is all about people going on the dole. It's all about people starting to want to receive credits if they can manage to find a way through to get credits. It's about people being displaced from due to automation, due to machine learning, and people being displaced and put into the care system. That's their number one priority, rather than looking at the rules associated with engagement with technology. So the priorities are a little bit to cock, but we certainly don't want the it's close in my industry. So in contact centres, for example, part of my industry is that there's projected to be, my calculations say within 10 years there will be an additional 1.5 million people out of contact centres, and those are from the most vulnerable in our society. Contact centres are will bring in the strays. You've got students, part-time students, working mums. You've got people with lower levels of education working in contact centres. These are the most vulnerable people in our society, and they're going to be displaced and put on the dole queue as a result of automation. So that's what our government are concentrating on now, rather than the bigger picture, which is supposed to be how do we have a grown-up conversation about the growth of that technology. The punitive taxation is never going to work. It's quite frankly, it's never going to work, because let's face it, big corporations don't pay the tax now. If you give them an AI tax, they're never going to pay that either, are they?
Just to end, and someone mentioned lobbying earlier. I think Tech Southwest are interested in whether there could be a peer group down here looking at tech ethics. There's apparently a similar group in Bristol that's got 400 members, and it only launched last year. So if it's a conversation that people want to continue, then let us know, or let Software Cornwall know, because as a voice Cornwall can be loud and interesting and different. So yeah, that's a conversation to definitely continue. I think all three of you are going to be here for the rest of the day, so grab them for further questions. And thank you so much. It was mind-blowing to speak to you three.
And then